everybody, it's me, Mumtazah. I'm from grade 6, and today's question is, what is creativity? Well, in my words, creativity is when you have the ability to create something new, unique, and that stands out. Well, there's many things that comes from creativity. Well, for example, fashion. Well, there's many things from fashion, and one of them are bags. And bags, they all come from creativity, like these two. So don't underestimate your creativity because it can always turn something big. Goodbye everybody, I'll see you again.
In my opinion, I think creativity is something big for everyone. Like, you can have crazy ideas with your big imagination. You think like about any invention you could do, and I think all it takes is your creativity, your idea, and what to do. And with that crazy idea, maybe you can achieve your dreams and do anything with your crazy idea.
I'm Omana and I'll be the moderator today. So the two videos that you just watched was made by our students, and that might have given you a hint about our topic today. So before introducing the topic, let me share a quick fact with you. Right, so do you know that the writing system for blind people, the Braille, was invented by Louis Braille, who was just 15 years old then? And do you know that Frank Everson, who was just 11 years old, invented what we know as popsicle? Now, all this invention were the spark of creativity in the child's mind. So, dear viewers, that's our topic today, teaching creativity and creative teaching. So before we get started, I would like to go over the segments that we will mainly discuss today. So we'll be sharing about our personal notion of creativity, and then we will talk about why creativity is important and why what blocks creativity, how do we develop creative potential of our students, and last but not least, how do we become creative teachers. So viewers, you will have the opportunity to submit the questions in the chat box at any time during the discussion. We will address them during the end of our session today. So let's get started. Now, dear teachers, you can introduce yourself.
All right. Hi, I am Mumtazah binti Hanafiah Lais Muhammad Kani. I am 26 years old. I have been teaching for almost 2 years now after graduating. Currently, I am teaching music and also art for primary school, and I am a language teacher of Malay for both primary and also secondary school.
Hi everyone, my name is Sahba. I'm the head of lower primary department at BIS. I've been teaching for the past 5 years. Currently, I'm the homeroom teacher for grade 2, and I teach English and math.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Rais Azmi. So I'm studying in fine arts. So I am an art teacher for primary and also secondary students. So I'm teaching art, and I normally do painting and drawing also. So I exhibited my works in the art gallery, and I have 3 years experience in teaching.
All right, and I'm Omana. I'm the homeroom teacher for grade 6. I teach social studies and English. So let's get started. Now, teachers, how would you define creativity, or what is your personal notion about creativity? Now, for me, creativity is everything about being a teacher for me. So it's in my lesson planning. How can I create a topic, or how can I teach a topic differently from the way it was taught before? Mm-hmm. How can I inspire my students to think and rely on their own ideas? Now, maybe Ms. Mumtazah?
Okay, so of course there are so many different ways of defining creativity. For me, the definition would be when people are able to learn something new, and when people are able to solve the problems, and also when people are able to have fun. Let's say if we are in a class where students and teachers are having fun in the lesson, this is because I believe the reason is because of the teachers have thought of new ideas to teach the students to be engaged, for the students to be engaged and also to have fun. Mm-hmm. So if the teacher doesn't use the creativity inside the lesson, so the lesson would be dull, would be simple. And also if if we use creativity, students might be able to also solve problems
Yes.
when they are learning. So that is my definition of creativity.
All right. What about Mr. Rice? How would you see that?
Well, for me, creativity is something that, of course, you need to have functional and originality. And if you look back to the real definition of it, it's about a meaningful idea that is functional to the society. As we all have our this kind of gadget in our daily life, so our telephone is actually one of the invention of creativity. So if you look back to the invention from Graham Bell, so Graham Bell invented telephone during 1876, if I'm not mistaken. So Graham Bell created that because of the society have a problem to communicate from one place to another place. So they invented that because we need to communicate. Let's say I am in a place A and then Mumtazah is in place B. So we are far away. So how can we communicate if we don't have that kind of tools? So for me, creativity is not like only for the gadget. It's not only for the technology. It could be in various forms. It could be like painting, sculpture, maybe like writing. So it could be various forms.
All right. Now, how about Ms. Sahba? How do you see that?
Creativity is the action of turning an idea, thought, or imagination into reality. You know, and it can often be connecting in different ideas in an interesting, new way. There are a lot of examples of creativity. For instance, teachers who come up with new ideas or teaching methods to keep their students interested in the topic and engaged. Or all the inventors in the world, because creativity is the heart of invention.
Yes, true. So there are so many different schools of thought that emphasize, including creativity in daily curriculum. So why now there is an increased emphasis placed on creativity? Maybe Ms. Sahba can answer that.
Yeah, sure. Well, a lot of studies reveal that, in children, curiosity is nearly universal. And according to my personal experience, I can say that a 6-year-old student of mine today is a lot more curious and eager to know more about the world compared to a 6-year-old student I had 5 years ago. I have a student who loves to watch videos and cartoons about space and spaceships and planets and stars. And one day he showed me a drawing of his version of a spaceship where he added all these functions and and he explained all the details to me about it. And he used only a little bit of his prior knowledge, and the rest was all his ideas and imaginations. And I found that very creative.
Right. So what about Ms. Mumtazah? Why do you think creativity is very important?
I think nowadays people are emphasizing creativity in everyday lessons and also curriculum. That is because they want to provide students a platform for them to explore more or to express what they have in their mind. So creativity itself is actually expressing the ideas, right? So we can see that if people don't give the chance or don't give the platform for students to express, how can they do that, right? So we can see that, for example, if a student doesn't have the chance to do that, maybe they actually have brilliant ideas. We don't know. So it is really important that we emphasize this in curriculum. And also, if we give them the platform, they could also think of different way to solve problems. So that is why I think nowadays people are emphasizing creativity in everyday lessons.
Yes, it's true that we are actually facing a complex, energetic, and tech-savvy students. And no students in the history of education is like today's modern learners. They want to be constantly inspired, challenged by the teachers, even society. And not only that, the rise of complex problems in 21st century requires creativity skills to overcome issues such as poverty, climate change, food security, even COVID-19, which was not around a year ago, and now it needs no introduction. So you can see that there's always a newer complex problem that arise, which we definitely need creativity skill to address such issues, right? Now, let's discuss about some of the misconception or stereotype that blocks creativity. Maybe we'll start from Ms. Sahba.
Sure. I strongly believe that the environment plays a more prominent role in developing creativity rather than personal factors. The house that we grow up in, the classroom that we study in, even the decorations of the classroom, and of course the people around us. When we talk about creativity, people automatically assume that we're referring to art or music or drawing or any kind of painting. But the truth is that creativity is any way that you can express yourself or an interest that you have in any field. For example, if I have a student in my classroom who wants to try a different method to solve a subtraction problem, and I discourage them and I tell them that, okay, no, you should follow exactly my steps and the way that I'm teaching. So I'm definitely blocking that kid's creativity. And what happens to that student is that they would never want to try anything new again in any other classes. And this does not only apply to children or students. I think as adults, we might have different ideas every day, even business ideas sometimes. And the people around us, like our friends and family and colleagues, they're the ones who can encourage or discourage us. They're the ones who can comment on these ideas. And I strongly believe that environment plays an important role.
Right. Now, what about Mr. Rais? What do you think about that?
It's quite interesting when Ms. Sahba said about environment, because I can add to that point, because if I can share my own experience, since I was a child, I have very supportive parents, which is they encourage me to do an art, because since I was a child, in my room, if my family knows that I always drawing, I have a lot of comic book, I have a lot of sketchbook. So from there, I just using pencil and maybe a pencil color during that time. So based on my potential, based on that kind of situation that my parents saw during that time, and then my parents bring me to the art class. So from there, I learned much more rather than a comic or a cartoon. From there, I learned about fundamental about art. I learned how to explore the art materials, and then I learned how to develop my creativity skills. So I can't imagine if I don't have that kind of positive encouragement from parents, I think I won't be here right now. And regarding to the questions about stereotype about creativity, right? So I think we're familiar with Leonardo da Vinci. So he is one of a creative person. So based on my reading, he is not only an artist. Okay, if you talk about art is only for creativity, whenever people always familiarize that art is creativity, music is creativity, dancing is creativity. But for me, in my opinion, if I can go back to the artist Leonardo da Vinci, he's not only the artist, he's a scientist, he's an engineer, he's also create a drawing for architecture, and some of them is the anatomy studies. So some of the drawing being used for the medical. So I think creativity is not only for
arts. All right. So what about you, Ms. Mumtazah? What's your perspective on that?
So I think that creativity can be blocked when people tend to listen to other people's opinion. So this actually can happen, especially to a group of people who have a very low confidence level or self-esteem. For example, in a situation where these people want to speak up and give ideas, which is maybe unique ideas or different ideas, which is not familiar with other people. So there will be feedback. The feedback could be from any people, anyone, could be from your friends, could be from your parents, teachers, or even strangers. So when you give opinions, of course there will be feedback, which is positive, and also there will be negative feedback also. But this group of people, or even I think anyone, would feel would tend to listen to the feedback that is negative side.
Yes.
So when this happens, these people would think that they might not feel like sharing anymore, because what they get is negative feedback, and they listen to it. So this is why I think that creativity is being blocked when people tend to listen to the feedback, which is a negative one. Yeah.
Yes, so I actually have the same opinion
Mhm.
as all of you. Now, when you talk about creativity, people often relate it to just art and music, which is not true, because creativity can be across the domain, right? It can be any subject. And there's no such thing that some are born creative and some are not born creative. In fact, creativity actually requires hard work and effort. But not everyone would agree with the value or the importance of including creativity in today's society. So here I actually have three statements, or I would say common ideas about creativity.
Okay.
Now I would like to know about your thoughts and about this statement as an educator, right? So the first statement here is creativity can be taught. And second one is creativity is genetic. And the third one is creative ideas have to be original. So maybe we'll start from Mr. Rice. Yes.
Okay, it's a very good question, Miss Omana. So creativity cannot be taught. So in my honest opinion, creativity we cannot 100% teach the students. So
Yes.
like we can 100%, okay, this is creativity, you do it, and then magic, then and then
Yes.
the outcome of it happens. No, it have to be a process before that. It have to be research before that, and then we need to have the skill, and then right after that we need to implement that. So I think this kind of process is very important in order to produce something creative. So as I mentioned before, I think in my class I always like teach the student to have a structure. Do your work with the structure, because without a structure you don't know where to go. You don't have the step one until the end.
Yes.
So you have the structure, then you can produce something new with a good organization, so that we can get the final outcome. And then regarding to the genetic, right? So the genetic, I think, in my opinion, because I have read about one of the famous artists, if you guys know about Claude Monet. So Claude Monet is one of the artists that is coming from the style from Impressionism. So Claude Monet's idea, why I call his as a creative person, because he's creating that kind of style. He's creating that kind of ism. We call it Impressionism, based on the painting called Impressionist Sunrise. So from there, Claude Monet create that kind of era. They call it as Impressionism. But if I look at his son, Jean Monnet, he's not into art. He's more into chemist. So
Yes.
I strongly, for me, I think it's not from genetic. It's coming from your idea. It's coming
Yes.
from your the way you're thinking. And the last one is about originality,
Yes.
right? Creativity is originality. In my opinion, creativity need to have original.
Yes.
But if I going back to my first point, which is the Graham Bell telephone,
Telephone, yeah.
right? So I think the words is more into innovation. It's not creativity. Whenever something that is recreate or the existing product is there, and then we innovate that, we improvising that, because before this we cannot bring the telephone everywhere, a big one. So now they invented, and then they start to improvising it until we can have our smartphone today. So that's about innovation.
Yes. So what about Miss Mumtazah? What's your thought on this?
Okay, so I would like to go to the first point of creativity cannot be taught. So I think creativity cannot really be taught, because how can you teach creativity?
Yes.
Like when you give a piece of paper and then, hey guys, I want to teach creativity today. I don't think we can really teach that. So what instead we can we can have support or give encouragement to the people who have this potential. So, for example, what Mr. Rais said just now, he said that when he was small, the parents saw that he has the ability to create something which is unique, and which is he has the skills to paint or draw something. So the parents did send Mr. Rais to the art classes. So it's the same when also the other parents also, when they see that the children of theirs have ability or the other ways of thinking. So what they do is they send the children to the art classes or languages or even cooking classes just because they can see the creativity they have in their child. So I think that is the solution of creativity. Cannot really be taught.
Yes,
Yeah, I
actually,
agree.
it's sort of true because you can't really teach creativity, because teaching means you need to have a set of instruction or a set of rules, which
Exactly.
is quite impossible. But we know that all children are actually born creative and they have this capacity to be creative, right? So it's just that it doesn't mean that they can develop on their own. They need someone to nurture them. They need someone to encourage and support them. So that's where teachers play our role. Now, in fact, there's a widely cited study by George Land where he found that all children are actually born creative, but over the time, they lose their creativity when they transition into their life or their adulthood, right? Now, since we said that all children are born with the capacity to be creative, how do you do that in your classroom? How do you develop your children's or your students' potential in your classroom, Mr. Rais?
Yeah, it's another good questions from Ms. Omana. I think people don't know how can we set the potential, because creativity is like very flexible. We can create something, but how can we guide them? So normally in my class, I will always emphasize on originality, because in my class normally they will do a design, right? Because I'm teaching art. So in my class they did a design, and I always emphasize your outcome. The final outcome need to be original. It's coming from you, story from you. It's not like you are copying other people's design. That's not creativity. That is copying. So creativity needs to have something new. So for me, for example, in my class, I did a project named packaging of bottles. Packaging, their own logo, their own colors. So as far as you can see in the screen, so it's about the what do you call it, the what do you call it, the structure itself. So I need to have the structure. Okay. First of all, you guys need to have a research. You need to get inspired by the previous one, and then you guys need to do the sketches, and then you need to have the color scheme. And then the last part, you guys need to implement that. So that's how I taught the student how to be more creative. Ms. Ona, I have something to say at the end of the session. So I hope the audience can stay until the end of the session, because I have something to surprise to tell you guys.
All right. So yes, we'll wait for that. Now, Ms. Mumtazah, how do you develop your students' creative potential in your classroom?
Of course, there are so many ways to develop students' creativity potential. So what I always do is that I always make sure that when students are making a task, they do the task, but it has to be a different version of it. So as teachers, of course, we have our own lesson objective in everyday lesson. So it's the same with me, and we want the children to also be creative at the same time. So for example, what I do recently is I ask the students to perform 4 bars of rhythms. So I say to them, you need to perform this rhythm, but on your own way. Actually, I have the video of it. So let's watch it together.
Right.
Got a feeling that I'm going under, but I know that I'll make it out alive. I quit calling you my lover and move on. You watch me with a champagne, say
food chains. Now look at that bird up in the sky. It's probably going to be eaten by something. Now have a look at this grass. It's a producer, so that's why it's eaten by a herbivore, which is the primary consumer, and in this case it's the sheep. So the secondary consumer has to eat the sheep, which in my food chain is a fox, and the fox is to be eaten by the tertiary consumer, which is the coyote. And the coyote must be eaten by something called the quaternary consumer, which in this case is a bear. The last animal in the food chain is the tiger, which is the top predator, so it cannot be eaten by anything. That's all for this video. See you later, bye!
So actually the video shown just now, there are two.
Interesting.
One is the rhythm practice, and also another one is about food chain. So that is the example where I showed them, when I told them to stay on task but make their own version of it. But however, we have to make sure that when we are letting the students be creative, we also need to know that students have their own students have different background knowledge, right? So some of the students might not even know what to do if we give a blank piece of paper, because they might feel confused, or what do I do? But some of them might feel eager to, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. So how do I solve this is by making sure that I inspire them first, or I give example to them first. Not a lot, just a little bit of example, so that those who don't have the ideas have a little bit of idea to do it. So I think that is my way to develop students' creativity potential. In my lesson.
All right. Now, what about Miss Sahba? What do you do in your classroom?
I have the same opinion as Miss Mumtazah. We have to be there to guide and monitor the students and make sure they stay on task. But at the same time, we need to give them the freedom to think outside the box and come up with their own ideas related to the topic. I believe that creativity can be nurtured and it can be practiced. And there are two things that I would do to boost my students' creativity. Number one, listen. Number two, encourage. So what I would do is, the first thing I do is really listen to what they have to say, their idea, not interrupt them. And secondly, I would encourage it always, because creativity grows when it's encouraged. So yeah,
So I can see that all of you are trying to say that you actually encourage students' intrinsic motivation. You set a goal, and at the same time, you let them to express their ideas. You give them a freedom to express their own ideas, but at the same time, they follow the objective, right? Now, if there's any teacher watching this live today, here's one question for you. How can you adapt or modify your existing assessment to also assess creativity? Now, back to our discussion. So, teachers, what do you do to be creative in your teaching? Now, I believe that we practice what we preach, right? So, when we expect students to be creative in their in the classroom, I believe that students will also have the same or similar expectation on us. So they want us to show our creativity in classroom. So Ms. Sahba, how do you exemplary that in your classroom?
Well, as a teacher, what I do is I use the syllabus that we have, but we have to make it interesting. And how I do that is that I try to inject creativity into the current educational structure, and to turn those long, boring units into fun, but at the same time, productive lessons. I always use visual representation in all of my lessons, such as pictures, slides, videos, objects even. It's also important for me to keep updated keep myself updated about the latest cartoons or animations and the characters in them, because then I can use those as examples, inject that into my lesson. One of the ways to be a creative teacher is to use different methods of teaching. For example, when it comes to spelling, I want to teach my students how to spell the word spider. Instead of asking them to keep writing and repeating and copying the same sentence over and over again, I would just give them simple and clear instructions to play a game, such as treasure hunt. So what I would do is I would number the letters, I would place them around the classroom and ask students to walk around the classroom, find the letters, put them in the correct order to find out what the word of the day is. Now, what happens here is that they are working in groups or pairs, and they're actually playing a game, but they are learning through that game. Their students never get tired of playing games. It's fun for them, but at the same time, they're actually learning. The topic is not important. What's important is the method that we use to teach it. There are so many teaching methods, such as PPP, presentation, practice, participation, production. So here the students are expected to put what they have learned into practice, or TTT, test, teach, test. This approach encourages the teacher to test the students' prior knowledge before teaching it, and then there's another test at the end of the lesson, or TBL, task-based learning, which revolves around the completion of meaningful tasks.
Yeah, right. Now, how about you, Ms. Mumtazah? How do you model your creativity in your classroom?
Okay, so since I teach Malay language to foreign students and also to local students, so this is actually quite difficult for me to handle. But what I do is I always let the students be the teachers instead of me being the teacher in the class. So I like to ask the advanced students to teach or give meanings, for example, to the beginners, because actually that can make them engage. So the advanced students will also think of a way, how do they deliver a lesson to the beginners. So actually this makes the students engage for both beginners and also advanced students. So this is like a mentor-mentee kind of method. And I also like to make students do presentation. So when you have to do presentation, that means you have to prepare materials. So students, they have to prepare materials. So there are a lot of outcomes of materials that they have made, for example, presentation slides. So it turns out that these students who have to do this presentation, so the presentation slide will be very interesting. There are so many, a lot of animations and cartoons and so on used by the student, and I think that is very interesting. And yeah, that is how I make a lesson creative. Yes.
Right, so I can actually relate to both of your points, because I've done what Ms. Mumtazah said. We call that peer teaching in my class, and I can also relate to Ms. Sahba's visual representation, because visual representation is actually very useful, especially when you're teaching young learners to teach them abstract ideas. Now, in my class itself, when I teach social studies, we were learning about World War I. And to teach them how all these countries got involved in this war, first of all, was very difficult, because that's the most confusing part. So what I did was I used a simple illustration to actually explain the whole scenario, and it actually worked. So after that, I told them to create their own illustration and just add a voiceover. So I found that was very great. And yes, maybe you guys should also watch that.
So once they had the war, Germany sided with Austria-Hungary and Russia sided with Serbia. So these two countries weren't alone in the war. And Germany wanted to have a war as well. They probably...
On July 28, 1914, 1 month after Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria and his wife were killed by Gavrilo Princip, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia.
Alright, so I hope you enjoyed the
That's
video.
a very cute drawing.
Right. Now, I think we have come to the end of today's discussion. Right now, I have some of the questions here sent by the audience. Now, the first question here, how do you use creativity to teach math? So I think this is for you, Ms. Sahba. You can answer that.
Okay, sure. It's very crucial to use, like I mentioned earlier, visual representation, especially because I teach kids mostly. And you can use the cartoon or animation characters and implement it in any lesson. You know, the subject is not important. For math, I would say, for instance, let's say I want to teach about number lines. Instead of writing all the numbers and drawing number lines and keep explaining about how it works and how the numbers are, I can just use one of those characters, animation characters, and implement that here. Or, for example, place a jelly bean on top of number 2, let's say. So what happens here is that the students pay attention to the jelly bean. The jelly bean is sitting on number 2. And as the jelly bean starts to jump forward, all the students automatically start counting. 1, 2, 3. Now the jelly bean has stopped. Now it's sitting on number 5. So the students can now look at the equation 2 plus 3 is equal to 5, and they can relate to that. And that's when they pay attention. So it doesn't matter what subject or what topic it is. It's important that you know how to get your students' attention.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Sahba.
You're welcome.
Now, the second question here is, what is the structure of a creative process? So I think this is for you, Mr. Rais.
Okay.
Because you mentioned about creative process earlier, right?
Okay, it's a good question. Thanks, Ms. Omana. So based on that question, what is the structure of creative process, right? Before this, I mentioned about it. So in general, I can say that in creative process, we have preparation, and then we have incubation, and then we have illumination. And right after that, we need to have evaluation. And last part is implementation. So that's the creative process. So what I teach the students is to play or to follow that kind of structure. First is preparation. So preparation, you need to have the data. You need to have the visual data. Okay, like the one I mentioned about bottles. So they need to have they need to gather the previous existing product that is using packaging of design. So they need to use a few data so that they can get inspired through that. And then from there, they can start to do their sketches. From that sketches, they can develop their own ideas. And then from there, that's where the illumination, you need to illuminate the part that you feel that not suitable. Okay? And then right after that, they need to do the color scheme. For example, they need to have to create a logo. Let's say the logo is blue and red, for example. Is it match? Let's say yellow and white. Is it match for the logo? So from there, we encourage the student to look which is the best design to be your final outcome. So from there, they evaluate themselves, and then they create that kind of their own logo until, of course, with my guidance. So I look at it and then I suggest them which is the best design, which is it's not the best design. So from there, they will select the final outcome to implement at the end of the process. So that's the structure of the creative process.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rais. Now, how do you assess music, or how do you measure a student's performance in music, Ms. Mumtazah? I think this is for
me, right? So how do I assess music performance, for example? Okay, what I do is, I believe there are so many ways of assessing students. What I like to do, what I like to choose is by using rubrics. So rubrics has its own criteria which we can follow. So if we have this criteria, it's easier for me to assess. For example, maybe when for example, just now I show about 4 bars of rhythm. So the main thing is I have to include in the rubrics is the rhythm itself. Did the students clap it or perform it accurately? So there will be numbers of scores for it. And then maybe if I want to assess singing, so maybe I should put in the rubric lyrics memorization. So this actually, when we have rubrics, students also can improve themselves later in future because they have the numbers of scores over there. So that is how I actually assess students in music or performance. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Mumtazah. Now, this will be the last question. So, what is the exciting thing that you wanted to share, Mr. Rais?
The interesting part
Yes.
of creativity. So I think creation or anything that regarding about creativity is very enjoyable. Creativity doesn't have to be so serious. So I think creativity is we need to enjoy our process until the end of the product. So creativity is one of enjoyable process, and of course, like I said before, it needs to have the step by step before you can have the outcome of the process. So yeah, that's for me. But yeah.
Thank you again, Mr. Rais. So, this concludes today's discussion. Now, thank you all for joining, and
Thank you for
thank you,
having
everyone.
us.
Yeah.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.